you've talked a little bit about kind of balancing, building consensus and balancing different interests that are part of our community. I guess I'd like you to maybe elaborate on that a little bit, and particularly, balancing and building consensus sounds great, but I wonder how you plan to do that in a situation where, say, there's a group of citizens that are just fundamentally opposed to all development, period, and want us to go back to the days where they could hear the frogs croaking downtown, versus people who are aggressively promoting any development in any without regard to the impact or the look. Talk to us a little bit about how do you do that? How are you going to bring competing views, strongly held views? It's one of the great things about Delafield, right? We have a lot of people who are very passionate about the city and have views, but they're not always consistent. How are you going to manage that?
So, I've already kind of started sharing some of these ideas back into our city, and how I became kind of aware of some of these competing ideas was through the Path Network that was being proposed. I personally think that the Path Network is great. I went to that first meeting and I saw how many of my neighbors are not fully on board with this Path Network, and it really kind of made me question why we weren't building awareness, why we weren't building engagement, and why we weren't also helping our citizens to become involved in the process from the beginning. So the process that I proposed and gave to our Parks and Rec team and also to our Public Works team was kind of a 5-step process. That's something that I've used many times over my career. The first part of that, and at the base of that, is your strategy. So you have to understand what it is that you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, and you have to have a common set of understanding going into it. However, the next part of that process is building awareness. So you need to help make sure that the community and everybody around knows that this is going to be happening. So in the case of the developments and the way that we're going to move forward with different design and architecture design in downtown, we would need to kind of build awareness that, hey, we're having this conversation and this is where it's going to be and we would like to have your voice. Then engagement, like once people are aware, then you have to give people the opportunity to participate. And so you need to host different community meetings where, they're not city meetings. I'm sorry, but city meetings do not promote engagement. We need to be able to have dialogue, and we need to be able to have people share their thoughts, and we need those differing opinions to come out in a constructive way, because right now we're not having those conversations in a constructive way. The next thing we need to do is, once we've kind of taken all of that feedback back, we do need to come up with a plan. We do need to make sure that everybody understands how we got there and that they feel like their voice was heard. When people feel their voices are heard and they feel like they have the opportunity to contribute, they tend to either get on board or just distance themselves from the project. And so I think that you're going to see that people will actually want to stay involved in the process and want to continue to have their voice and their perspectives in that process. So then you go through a readiness process where that helps everybody understand, what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be getting some of these maybe new investors, or how we're going to be courting some of the different businesses that we would have in the organization. And then you've got the whole transition piece, where that whole implementation piece. And finally, the last part is the adoption and sustain. So you need to make sure that people have an opportunity to provide their feedback. So it's not just that, and I think we saw that tonight with the Wells Street Station project. People didn't like that, and they had an opportunity and they provided a voice. And maybe that is also one of the reasons why it's so difficult for us to get other projects through right now. How do we fix that part of the process and make sure that people feel like their thoughts were heard, but also don't slow down the process going forward? So I think that it really comes back to communications, expectations, and engagement.
I'm going to rephrase the question, please.
Yeah, I'd like just your thoughts on, I think it's clear one of the challenges of trying to govern Delafield is building consensus and dealing with very strong and oftentimes completely inconsistent views and visions of the city. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on kind of how that has been managed, how it can better be managed, how to deal with it.
So, I mean, absolutely a challenge, right? And it happens on all levels, you know. When you've been in the job and you have the experience of the types of situations that citizens bring from you, it could be a neighbor-on-neighbor situation, all the way up to the development of a large parcel of land or development. So it varies, right? There are issues and you need to address them appropriately. Certainly citizens' involvement is absolutely imperative. There are costs to that. There are not unlimited resources within the city to be able to set up these meetings and so forth. So you have to use the information that you have that's already available as your starting place. And then where it's really important and you want to supplement it, for example, the Public Works Committee has been adamant about installing separated paths and bike lanes throughout the city of Delafield for many years. And they have struggled and been frustrated over time. And this year, the council, or they asked for $40,000 budget to go through one of these public processes, right? I mean, you think that's a big number. I mean, it is a big number. That's $40,000 out of the operating budget to properly hold citizen input meetings and so forth, according to the city engineer. Well, the council wasn't supportive of that, and they brought it down to $25,000, of which the council was willing to support that. So important. There isn't staff to do it on hand today, and it's important that we pick and choose where we're going to be able to have that expenditures. And preferably, you know, at least at a minimum, you want the council's commitment that they're willing to spend money on a project before we spend a lot of money researching and getting people's opinion for something that may never happen. We've had a history of doing that in the city, and that's something I'm not interested in doing. I'm only willing to do that when we have a funding commitment from the common council. And back to Sandra's question about, she seems to talk out of both sides of her mouth. I mean, she wants to do this planning and has this great idea, and then she's opposed to the $12,500 that we have to update the 1993 plan, which is exactly what that money's for. It's for citizens' input. It's to document this information and gather data so that we are trying to make the best decisions as we move forward. So these situations are a little complicated, and experience in dealing with them helps you get through them and fare through them more quickly and more accurately.
So if I can just respond a little bit, is that $25,000, that was actually the genesis for my communications to the Public Works team, is that I don't think we should be spending $25,000 on external consultants to help us through this process. This is an opportunity for our citizens to give back to the community. These are projects that I have led. I have facilitated these types of engagements. They're not difficult. Yes, we're going to need to have some people who will have to collect some of the notes and type them back into a computer and